Hey YouTube, this is the Death Scouter making another video, and today we are going to be talking about how we can use stock fenders, and I'm going to show you that mine are cut back, on or with the Rough Country metal fender liner inserts. So these specifically say from the dealer, or from Rough Country, that they are not compatible with the stock or factory fender flares. So the problem is, so you can spend $160 on these very nice metal Rough Country inserts, and they have this little plate that you can paint to match the color of your rig, which I did. Otherwise it's just shiny aluminum. So you can get this for $160 some, and then if you need to get aftermarket fender flares, you're looking about $360 a pair just for the front. So I said to myself that there's got to be a way to make this work, and that's what I did, because I, like so many other people, have cut back my factory flares, and you know, I think they look great. I think the cut back fender flares look great on the JK models. You got to know how to do it right, meaning you need to keep a lip here in the front, and you can't cut too much off the end, otherwise you're exposing this really ugly ribbed or exoskeleton support frame, and that just looks cheesy as anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to show you how to install these Rough Country liners. This video is going to talk about what you need to be mindful of if you want to make these Rough Country liners compatible with factory fender flares, and that is, in addition to how you need to cut the exoskeleton to go with your cut back fenders, and I'm approaching this as if you have trimmed back your stock fenders, and I'm not going to show you how to do that because there's a million videos on the internet on how to do that. But what I'm going to say is that in addition to cutting this back so that it looks good with your stock fenders after they've been cut back, you now have to go back for compatibility with Rough Country, and you have to trim back the sides, okay, and this whole front section up here is going to disappear. And you know what, let me go show you a stock one that's not been cut back so we can do a comparison. Right, so what we have here, we have a stock unmodified driver's side, which is the one closest to the right hand side of the screen, and then we have the post modified for the fender flares, and then again modified to match up with Rough Country. And here's what you're going to see. You're going to see all of this superstructure here has been removed. This piece up front, all through here that holds your side marker indicator, that's been cut away. All of these tabs along the side have been cut away. This is the section here that we're gonna trim significantly. Basically, it's all of this piece right here has got to come off to work with the Rough Country. Because if you don't have that, then what you're facing is that you can't butt up against this piece here on the Rough Country. This is what gives you a lack of compatibility. So if it was just as simple as cutting away the fender flare exoskeleton, that's what I'm going to call it, not exoskeleton, but skeleton, or support, it wouldn't be that terrible. But the other problem is that your fender flares, if you've never done this, let me go over to the other side. If you've never trimmed back your fender flares, you would realize that, camera's all over the place, isn't it? You would realize here, when you take a look at these clips, okay, these holes for these clips, that this fender flare, there's really nothing holding it on. The factory installation, the plastic fender liner actually comes up, rivets to the underside, and along with 2 or 3 bolts holds that whole factory fender flare on. But when you take out the factory fender flare, as you have to do when you trim away all this outer piece is that you've got to come up with a way to keep the fender from not flying off at highway speeds. Okay? The answer to that is usually met with something called an elevator bolt. Stick an elevator bolt through the top. It's nice and flush on top. Bolts through on the bottom. This will keep your fender on even after, you know, there's no supports. The other thing that you're going to have to keep in mind, and this is where you need to be a little more creative, is the 3 holes down the back closest to your driver or your passenger door. These are going to become screw mounts on the other side to hold on the rough country. What I'm showing you here is that I took a piece of sheet aluminum and created my own clip, because we could not have that open end there. Like, let's just keep walking around, shall we? Give you guys a tour of the Death Scouter household. You can't have these open clips, or else the fender would just fly off. Because what we need these things to do is marry on to these 3 bolts that hold the rough country in place. So the only way to do that is to find a way to solidify the holes on the other side. Now we're going to take another walk around. These were experimental and they worked really well, so I came up with something nicer. But take a piece of sheet metal, cut it so that it fits into this groove. This is actually recessed in the plastic itself, you'll see that, and then fold it over in place to make like a clip. And then you're going to use this amazing product called Permatex Black Silicone Adhesive Seal. And what you can do with this black seal is that sets very quickly. Very quickly. So, here we go. So I cut myself another piece of sheet metal. This is what I'm talking about. And I laid this sheet metal on here. And I drew on it from the other side so I know where these holes are. Okay, and then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to grab some, either put this in a vise so I get a nice straight edge across here, or I'm just going to grab it with some pliers and give it a bend. But my goal here is to make this into a clip. And I marked where all 3 of these holes are going to be, because I need to drill out the center hole to make room for these bolts, and so therefore they have to be lined up properly, or else it's going to be kind of cheesy. And then if you saw what I did on the other side, by drilling out holes for the 2 side markers, after I bend this under, I can put a tie wrap through here. So now, in addition to the Permatex glue, which I have to tell you is quite good, and it sets really fast, but in addition to the adhesive, I'm also going to use some small tie wraps for a second layer of securing this clip onto the frame, and then I'll have a nice solid piece from which I can put a bolt through and not have to worry about it blowing off either on the highway or when I ram into a puddle of mud when I'm off-roading, right? So let me recap for you, because I did an awful lot of talking in this video. I did a lot of moving around with the camera. My apologies. The 2 things that you have to do in order to make the rough country metal fender liners work with your factory fenders is you have to cut back the support and make sure that this is going to fit up on here as so after you've installed your fender liners. Then you have to make sure that your fender has got the clips on it, so especially for these 3, that this will now hold the fender in place without it blowing off. And then the last thing I want to show, the top of these rough countries are going to be held in place by a screw in the front, which we will actually take out and put back in on that front hole. You see that? So we're going to reuse that hole. We're going to reuse this bolt, and this one here in the back. Alright, thought I'd show you this. So this is the sheet metal after I I bent it. You can see that my goal here was to simply make a clip. Okay, and come over here. Hope you can see this. You know, I'm now in the messy part of my garage, and the clip now is going to fit right over where that should be. Okay, and once I've sized that, made sure that it's going to fit properly, and if need be, like here, you can see I got a little extra. What I'll be doing now is I'll pull out my my tin snips, right, and I will shorten the edges so that that clip sits flat. Still paying attention so that my holes line up. And then once it's glued on, I will get a drill bit and I'll drill it. Okay, so we're back. I want to show you that everything did go back together. I am still using my factory Fender Flares with my Rough Country metal inserts. So instead of buying $360 aftermarket flares, I was able to keep my factories. Just had to trim all this back, cut this whole section out up here, use the mounting screw to secure it. I mean, it is in there nice and tight. I kept my cuts close enough that I still had strength from around the mounting bolts. I do have to get a longer mounting bolt there. This is in nice and deep. And then I made the clips as I discussed earlier. They weren't gorgeous, but when I went ahead and hit them with some flat black paint, and then the other thing I want to point out is, you know, when you take off the factory Fender Flares, you're also cutting away this side indicator. Now, depending on what state you live in, I happen to be in Maryland, the People's Socialist Republic of Maryland, where I have to have a side indicator by law. What a lot of people do is they'll tie wrap them up here. It looks kind of ghetto. You know, it's just hanging there. I mean, most Jeeps are held together by tie wraps, but that doesn't mean it looks right. I'm going to do another video shortly and show you the custom jobs that I've done on, and I'm doing on this one to get a side indicator that works. And I'm going to be cutting into the wiring harness here for my turn signal, because the side indicator on Jeep by default is this 2-wire connection here, which I'll be plugging in, you know, which comes off of this little extension harness here. This is just lit when you turn on your parking lights or your headlights. But I'm going to get a 3-wire LED, and I'm going to tap into the turn signal wire, which is the white. I think it's white with a pink tracer over here, or white with a gray tracer over here. And I'll tie that back into my 3rd wire for my side indicator. So I will actually have side indicators that are not only just on when you turn on the parking lights or the headlights, but I'll also have a flashing turn signal on the side. So that'll be really cool. I'll show you that in another video. The reason I'm mentioning it now is when you put in these Rough Country inserts, you're going to basically be walling off this whole opening here. So now is the time to do your wiring harness, which is what I've got here on the passenger side. I went ahead, did my wiring harness, brought the wire up. I'm going to be doing a really cool LED setup up here where I've made my own wiring, my own light unit, which I'll explain in another video. But you definitely want to get this done first, and even if you're like, now I'm running out of daylight, I can go ahead and zip tie this up out of the way, but you got to get the wiring done before you put everything back together. Helpful hit number 27.